I was looking through and organizing some of the Renegade Taiiquan videos, and since I'm doing these pre-records as review for everybody, I thought that it might be good to do a little talk about the joints while I'm walking my dog here on the last days I'm here in Canada before I travel. So, balance around the joints, that's where we're going to start. We talk a lot in Taiiquan about Songjin, and Songjin is always translated as relax, but it doesn't mean like relax into a puddle on your couch. It means to relax as much as possible without losing potential power. Let's put it that way. So if a muscle can put out, say, 10 units of power, whatever that means, if you're already holding it at 5 units of tension when you're moving, walking, whatever, you've already made it so that you only have 5 units of force available to you, which is no good, right? So now if you start doing push hands or something, you only have half of what you could have. So proper sung is going to have, say, only 2 units held back. And that's just enough to be structurally sound, right? Enough to stand up, enough to move, things like that. But the thing about joints is that it's not enough to soften only one part of the body in order to get power out of your joints. You have to end up softening everything in relationship to one another. And remember, this is one of the reasons that I choose to use the word relationship to translate chi, just like my Kung Fu brother Kevin, because it's perfect. It works really well. So sung, in a way, that relaxed force could be seen to be relaxed in equal parts around joints, balancing the muscular tension around joints. So, for instance, if let's pick a joint. I'm holding my camera right now. So my shoulder's doing the work. Now, if only part of, like the forefront of my shoulder is strengthening to hold the camera, and yet my pec and everything else is loose and relaxed because it doesn't have to hold the camera, this is not sung, this is imbalanced, right? There's tension in a spot where there kind of shouldn't be. So if we were pushing hands right now, you would find that there's this tense spot in my shoulder, and that's a place that I wouldn't be able to deal with power anywhere near as easily or flexibly as if I didn't have that problem. So the thing is, you have to be able to go through every joint in the body like this and look at them so that you can figure out that there's always spots of tension and there's always spots of usually too much release, especially in Taiiquan people, right? We tend to have all kinds of issues with releasing actually too much. I did Yang style for about 10 years, maybe 12, before I started Chen. And everybody I talked to, every teacher I trained with was always talking about relax, relax, relax. But I always met a lot of Yang style people that would release to the point where they had nothing. So you'd go and push hands with them and all they would say is, oh, you're using too much force. And I mean, the bottom line is, if I'm using too much force and I'm too tense, you should be throwing me around. Why aren't you? And usually the answer is that there's not enough tension in the body. So again, back to that 10 units of force, 2 units of force conversation. If you're getting down to the point where, say, you're using 1 unit of force, just enough to like stand up, anybody puts pressure on you, you're going to break. So you have to be able to ramp that up as well. One of the sayings in Taiiquan later on when you're doing all the keywords is to learn not to run away from force. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of people see rollback. But anyway, that's not what this talk's all about. So, the joints. We have to soften every one of the joints in a balanced way so that the muscularity above the joint and below the joint are equally tense. This is what we're hoping for. That's the ideal, okay? But in order to do that, we need to understand what our joints are and what they're about. So, quick rundown of some joints theory. The ankles. Let's start at the bottom. What are the ankles for? Why do we have weak ankles? Well, a lot of it has to do with shoes, right? We have shoes that support the arches in our feet, so our feet end up getting weak. And we generally have flat bottoms on our shoes, and we generally walk on even terrain, right? We're always walking on pavement. And in our martial arts schools, we have all these nice, big, clean, flat, level spaces to train on, which, I mean, in a certain point of view is great. But it's taking our ankles, which are designed to deal with uneven ground as we run, and it's just making them stupid, right? People twist their ankles nowadays because the ankles aren't trained. So it's very difficult to have appropriate muscular engagement in the ankle if your ankles are completely untrained. This is one of the reasons people's ankles tend to be very, very weak. And it's actually, even in like really high level people, well, I guess they're not really that high level, but people who train a long time, sometimes you can make them move their ankles in dumb ways when you're doing push hands. So we have to make sure the ankles are trained. Walk on uneven ground. Don't look down at your feet when you do it. Make your ankles and feet seek out what's going on, and make sure that you can still walk upright no matter what's going on below you. Like when I'm walking my dog Dublin, I like to come to the park simply because it's absolutely uneven. Even these great, nice walkways that we've got, not even. Or we walk through the trees, which is what we're going to do here. So that's a little bit about the ankles. Now, come on, Boyle, let's go this way. Now, the knees. The knees are lever joints. And the lever joints of the knees are meant to transfer weight, not bear weight. This is why the rule exists that the knees must only go up and down, or must only travel forward and backward over top of the feet, as though they were on rails. If your knees go inside between the feet or outside the feet, then what you're doing is you're bearing some weight, and that's how you tear your knees apart. A lot of Tai Chi people have bad knees because of this one thing, because they'll learn choreography for years without corrections, and they'll just kind of mimic what they think they see, and next thing you know, their ankles are being, or rather their knees are being torn apart, and their ACLs get blown, and you end up with surgeries and all kinds of good stuff. So make sure that the knees are transferring weight to the feet and not bearing weight from the torso. Make sure they run only over the feet, as if they were on rails. All right, the hips. Hips are a big one. The hips, and I'm gonna talk about the hips a little bit before I talk about the quad. The hips are a ball joint, just like your shoulder. And what that means is that they can move in almost 360 degrees, right, to the limits of your flexibility. Now, because we walk, and when we walk all the time, we only use them as levers, right? They only go back and forth. They never do this inward and outward movement. And what that means is that the body will always adapt to whatever you put it through. Come on, Dublin. So if my body is adapting to me only using my joint and my hips that way, then what's going to happen is the muscle is going to striate. It's going to start to grow kind of little fingers out to strengthen the joint for its range of motion, which actually makes us less flexible when it comes to pronate and supinate. I think that's what it's called. Inward and outward turns. So that's where you get the quads closing up. I've met old school masters that one of the reasons they thought that nobody from the West could be good at Tai Chi was because we sit on toilets. And if we're not squatting to use the bathroom since, birth, then the quad, the hip joint, and all of the muscularity around it ends up closing up. What are you doing, Dublin? Come on. So, we have to make sure that we open our quads, which means we need to be flexible in our hip joints. This is why you see Kung Fu guys doing splits and stretching and all that kind of stuff all the time. Stuff that you tend not to see a lot of Tai Chi people do, because it's unpleasant. I'm not going to lie to you, it's unpleasant. Okay, now we're just going to do the limbs for now, because this is already becoming a fairly long video. The shoulders. The shoulders are also ball joints. It's actually like a cup with a ball sitting inside of it. And what that means, let's go this way, is that we can actually bring our arm up over our back. Okay, this is actually for brachiation. This is so we can hang from trees. What it also means is that you can pull the ball out of the socket completely because it's just being held by muscularity. This is where your Tai Chi teacher is telling you your shoulders can't be up. You have to keep your shoulder down. Because martially, if you put your shoulder up and pull it out of the socket, somebody grabs onto it, they will dislocate your shoulder and they'll tear your rotator cuff. It's one of those favorite tactics in things like Tai Chi and praying mantis. If you can catch somebody with their shoulder out, you can actually just end the fight. Because it's very, very painful to have your rotator torn or your shoulder dislocated. I know, I've had it done. Both of them have done to me. So when you're doing things like white crane spreads its wings, right? And you're bringing your arm up, you have to keep the shoulder joint in place. You can't have it come up. And if you bring your shoulder up into this spot, you can feel, once again, that there's an imbalance in the muscular tension around the shoulder joint. And that's always what we're looking to remove. We want to find balance every time. Okay? Really, really important. The elbows. Now the elbows, oh, they're slick. They're tricky little buggers because of our shoulders. So the elbow joint is a lever, which, just like the knee, means it's meant to transfer weight, not bear weight. In this case, it's the bearing of force back and forth. Okay? And yeah, we do things like push-ups and stuff to strengthen the arms by making them bear weight in little increments. But when it comes to martial arts, we have to have a whole body that's connected, and we have to have balance and muscularity around the joints. So the elbow joint always has more power and structure if it's closer to the body than your hand is. Okay? So this kind of thing actually disengages different muscles in the body, so that if I had to push or bear weight here, I would be very weak. If the elbow is closer than the hand, I'm always going to be stronger. I'm going to have the strength of my bones as a lever, and I'm going to have a lot more of my body engaged and a lot more balance around the joints themselves. The other thing is, when the elbows are out, so say I'm like in a single whip or something, the more the elbow points towards the earth, the more structure and power it'll have, and the more release you're going to be able to get for your sung and your balance around your joints. So you'll see there's movements and forms, like in Yang and in Chen, where the elbow will be out and then it'll settle and sink. Most of the time, this is because the power is not actually meant to be here. It's meant to be up here in the humerus and in the shoulder. Okay? And then when I drop my elbow and I get into this position where I can use my bones as levers more efficiently, then the elbow becomes a transference joint rather than weight bearing. If you're pushing hands with somebody and you can feel your triceps when you try to push, likely elbows in the wrong place. The wrists. Wrists are a fun one, and they're tricky. One of the trickiest, really. The problem with the wrists is that we naturally turn them. And that doesn't sound bad at first, but this way. But when I turn my wrist, and I'm going to have to define this, turning my wrist looks like this. Now what's happening though is my forearm's moving, not my shoulder, okay, not my torso. This has nothing to do with the rest of my body. My forearm is doing this work. This is turning. And if I want to, quote unquote, turn my wrist over in a movement, say like, I was talking Yang style, say like Wild Horse parts its mane and the wrist rolls over, that movement can't be isolated in the forearm joint. That's turning. It has to be a spiral. Well, then what's spiraling? Spiraling is a turn that is happening vertically. So your axis, right? So your spine is turning, Dantian turns, spine turns, whole torso's turning, and then that will move the humerus, the upper arm, right? The upper bone in the arm, and that will roll over your hand. So hopefully you can see that. So this is turning the hand, right? Whereas this is more of a spiraling action. I don't know if you're able to see that with me holding the camera, but if I can pay attention to every one of my joints and how they're being moved and how they're bearing weight or transferring weight, and the balance of tension around my joints, I'm going to start to get sung. So now, by looking at it that way, you could say sung is not working any harder than you have to. One of my favorite sayings is Tai Chi's really lazy. Man, I'm a lazy Tai Chi guy. The lazier I can be and throw somebody around, the better I know I'm doing. Let's go this way, buddy. Come on, Dublin. Yeah. Right? So what I mean by that is that I'm using less and less effort, less and less force to do things, which means that I have balance around my joints and my whole body is being used. So this is basically, it's very simple. Let's go back to the 10 units of power. So let's say a muscle in your body has potential of 10 units of force, okay? If I have all of my body sitting at that 5 units of force just to hold me up, okay, because I'm too tense, I only have about half of my strength to do anything. But if I can get every muscle group in my body to relax, balance around the joints at about a 2, suddenly I have 80% of my body's force available for work. Because that 2, right, that 2 out of 10 on every muscle group is enough to keep me upright, to make me move, to make me engage with people, to touch, all this kind of stuff and not quite be crushed. Because I have all these rules for posture, right? So now this 80% is sitting in reserve. Now you're talking Taiji can start to be something. This is why they call it internal power. It's one of the main reasons, right? I have a whole bunch of power in reserve. I haven't let everything out just to move. That's the idea. I never exert the force till there's a place to exert the force. Whereas if you look at a very external art, they might just throw a punch with 100% of their force and really hope that it hits. And if it doesn't, you just wasted all that energy, all those calories. Be lazy. Oh God, be lazy. So, without getting into the spine and Tanjong and all of that, this is how you can look through your form and make a checklist. What are my ankles up to? Are they dealing with uneven ground? Stop training on flat ground. Right? What are my knees doing? Am I over my feet? Am I transferring my weight or bearing my weight? What are my hips doing? Do they roll in and out? Can I squat down without problems? Where's my elbows pointing? Are my shoulders down? Am I turning my wrists or am I spiraling my wrists? All of this kind of stuff has to be, this is foundation stuff, right? This is still beginner level Taiji. But without it, there is no advanced. I hope this helps. Good luck.